Hello students, I welcome you to another lecture on AECC English Communication, and today we are going to discuss barriers of communication. So let's start with a discussion as to what do we understand by this word called as barrier, right? So barrier can be of many types. It can be a physical barrier, it can be a psychological barrier. So barrier basically refers to any kind of obstacle, any kind of difficulty that is present in the process of communication, or any kind of disturbance that stops our effective communication. If you remember what I'm talking about, communication is only effective when the message is properly conveyed from person A to person B, and a response is also generated back from B to A. So there are various barriers, various obstacles, various problems that crop up during the process of communication, and this is what we are going to discuss. What are the things which hamper the process of communication, making it ineffective? So what is the first one? The first one is lack of proper planning. What do we mean by this? Now, this lack of proper planning comes in the category of verbal barrier. Too often we find that people start talking or writing without thinking or planning. A lot of times you must have seen, for example, if an essay is given to you to write. Now, before you organize your thoughts, before you plan out everything, if you start writing, you will find yourself getting stuck after a point of time. You will not be able to continue writing that particular essay till the end. Why does that happen? Because there is a lack of proper planning. They do not clearly state the purpose of the message. This results in miscommunication, a partial breakdown in the process of communication. So, when there is no proper planning, that communication which we desire does not ultimately comes to fruition. The communication that we want, it is not resulting in effective communication because of the lack, because proper planning is not in place. Next, what is the second barrier of communication? Selection of a wrong variety of language. Now, sometimes certain words and expressions are very culture specific. If we do not use them appropriately, it might lead to miscommunication. For example, I'm giving you a very simple example. Uh, what is what is referred to as an apartment, okay, in the US is referred to as a flat in Britain. Okay, so if you're talking to a British person and you want to refer to a flat but you're calling it apartment, that Britisher is not going to able to understand, right? There are certain terms. Similarly, flat in Britain can refer to an apartment, whereas flats in India can refer to slippers, right? So there should be a proper language, a commonly understood language that is supposed to be used between person A who's trying to communicate to person B who's trying to receive the message. I can give you another example where the selection of long variety of language results in a barrier of communication. If you go to buy vegetable, ठीक है, आप सब्जी वाले के पास जाते हैं and that vegetable seller, she does not understand English. After buying a few vegetables, if you ask her in English, like how much do I have to pay, she will not understand because she is not familiar with this particular language English. So when there is a wrong selection or a wrong variety of language being used, then it becomes a kind of barrier to communication. The third one is badly encoded or wrongly decoded. It can be words, it can also be the whole message. What do we mean by it? The sender may have clarity about the message that is to be conveyed, but it may still not reach the receiver because the message might have been improperly expressed. So a bad encodation, if you're not able to bring clarity, if clearness is not present in the message, there is a chance of misinterpretation, there's a chance of miscommunication. Similarly, if the person who is supposed to receive the message and decode it, if he is not able to understand, then it becomes a problem. Next, there is point number 4, choice of wrong word. There's absence of punctuation mark. Wrongly timed pauses can cause miscommunication. What do we mean by this? Like absence of punctuation mark. I'll give you the example of a sentence. Let's eat grandma. Okay, there are two sentences. The first one is let's eat grandma, and the second sentence is let's eat, comma, grandma. Now, obviously, the both these two sentences they sound the same, right? The only difference is the pause that is being put after the words. Now, the first sentence, let's eat grandma, indicates that you should be ready to eat grandma, right? Whereas the second sentence, let's eat, comma, grandma, indicates that you're asking your grandma to eat with you, right? So, this is where sometimes absence of punctuation mark or wrong choice of words can convey a completely different meaning. Now, poor organization of ideas as well as excessive use of jargon. What is the meaning of the word jargon? Jargon refers to too much of, words which are technical in nature. That is called as jargon. They can also act as a barrier in the process of effective communication. At times, it is the listeners who may contribute to this miscommunication by wrongly decoding the message. That can also happen. Coming to the next barrier, which is the non-verbal barrier. Now, what is non-verbal? We have already done it. Non-verbal cues. Cues are nothing but hints. They form an important aspect of communication, and the receivers tend to trust the non-verbal messages. Meaning, it's more easier for a person to judge the other person and what their intentions are or what is going on in the mind by looking at their faces rather than listening to the words that they are speaking. Why? Because one can be deceptive with words, right? One can choose to lie, but it is very difficult to control facial emotions or facial expressions or subtle hints. You know, sometimes flashing eyes, rolling eyes, quick movements, very slow movements, avoiding eye contact may also cause non-verbal barriers to effective communication, right? If you're giving instruction to a particular person and if they roll their eye, what does it indicate? It indicates that that person is just listening to you. Sorry, he's just hearing what you're trying to say. He's not actually listening, right? Because listening is a more of a mental involvement that is there. Now, rolling eyes can also mean that you say whatever you want to say. I'm not going to do it. Quick movements. If you are asking a friend of yours to bring you a glass of water, if she goes to bring the glass of water very excitedly, it means that she wants to help you with that glass of water. But if the movement is very slow, it is very easily understandable that she is not interested in doing that work. Again, avoiding eye contact. A person might be lying, but if they are avoiding eye contact, it means that they are not honest, they are not being honest. Then further, we have raising eyebrows constantly suggests that the speaker is not convinced about the information that he or she has said. It's a kind of an unconscious movement on your body part, right? Like if you're not convinced yourself and if you're trying to convey that message to the other person, automatically your eyebrows are going to be raised. Then there are bulging eyes, which leaves the audience alienated as the speaker unnecessarily sounds arrogant even when the speaker keeps his or her hands in the pockets of his trousers. Now, putting your hands in the front pocket of your trousers is considered to be very disrespectful. The person will come across as snobbish. Snobbish, a person is called a snobbish person if they have a superiority complex about themselves or if they look down upon the others. It can make you appear deceptive or even too scared to the audience who is standing in front of you. So these are all these non-verbal cues which convey a completely different message than what you are trying to portray. Then we have listening barriers, right? Due to poor listening, there can be miscommunication. So, poor listening results in incomplete, incorrect, and inconsistent responses. If you're not able to listen to what the message is trying to communicate, the response is obviously going to be flawed. Sometimes people do not listen to others properly and patiently because rather than listening, they may just be waiting for the speaker to stop. Everybody wants to talk at the same time, nobody wants to listen to anybody. Now, listening requires the following necessities. There are three things which can make you a good listener.
The first one is concentration, the second one is patience, and the third one is focus. If these three qualities or these three attributes are there in you, then you can become a good listener, and then listening barriers can be easily avoided. Now, in the 21st century, listening has become a very difficult task. This is very true. Why? Because although we pretend to listen to others while sitting in a meeting or attending some old presentation, we are usually occupied with the idea of speaking at the first chance or opportunity. You're just waiting for your chance to speak and not listening properly. And besides that, there are also many distractions present around us which disturb our concentration. It can disturb our focus, which can end up in creating listening barriers. The seventh kind of barrier is physical and mechanical barriers, right? So, what can be considered as physical barrier? Like closed office doors, physical distance between the communicators. If you are standing at point A and your friend is 100 meters away, it will be very difficult for you to communicate with words. Maybe with gestures you'll be able to do it, but with words it becomes difficult. So, physically, that distance creates a barrier in the process of communication. There can be disturbance in the transmission process, in the channel. All these come in physical barrier. Now, distance is a barrier that often affects communication, and we require proximity. What is proximity? Nearness, in order to communicate effectively so that the message reaches from person A to person B very easily. Next is mechanical barrier. What is mechanical barrier? At times, poor listening, lack of space or margins, very small font sizes, crowded paragraphs create mechanical barriers. Keep this in mind that whenever you're writing your answers, your teachers must have told you this, your peers must have told you that your answer should be written very neatly, it should be very well spaced out. Don't clutter the lines so that it is easily legible or readable. Even when the words are written compactly, it's very difficult to read the message, and it results in a barrier called as mechanical barrier. Similarly, there can be improper functioning of communication transmission machines. For example, a fault in hearing aids. If somebody uses hearing aids for listening and they do not have a working battery, it will result in miscommunication. It will act as a mechanical barrier. There can be lack of network in mobile phones. If you have gone to a remote place and the network is not there, then it becomes an example of mechanical barrier. There can be some kind of technical error or failure of microphone during a speech. An auditorium is full of people, and the person who is standing on the podium, if the mic fails to work, then the communication process is hampered or disturbed, and it becomes a part of mechanical barrier. So these things all hamper or break down the process of effective communication, and this is what we need to take into consideration. Next, we will be talking about psychological barrier. Now, what do we mean by psychological barrier? Psychological refers to a psyche. Psyche is mind. Now, compared to physical barriers, psychological barriers are far more damaging, and they cause frequent disruption or disturbance in the process of communication. How? Now, some of the psychological barriers I can give you examples are, presence of fear. When you're afraid, it is very difficult for us to speak in front of the other person. If there is distrust, if I don't trust anybody, it will be very difficult for me to open my heart to somebody. One can be absent minded, one can have a lost focus, like the focus is not there, you will not be able to communicate. If you are too happy or if you are too sad, you will find tears rolling down your eyes, rolling down from your eyes. That is intensity of feelings. When you're overwhelmed with your emotions, you feel yourself to be choked, right? The voice does not come out. There can be lack of interest, obsessive temperament, multiple distractions. So, all these things come in the category of psychological barrier, which stops you from having an effective communication. Okay, so the next barrier that we need to discuss is premature evaluation of a message. Now, this is an undesirable tendency to jump to conclusions, hasty conclusions, giving approvals or disapprovals without very quickly without thinking about what is being said to you. Now, whatever is being said or written is generalized. Again, a mistake without thinking about its authenticity. This results in failure in communication because the listeners as well as the readers evaluate the message without understanding the real meaning or essence. So, first, one needs to listen to the whole thing quietly and patiently and then come to a conclusion. If you decide to reach a premature evaluation of a message, there is a very good chance that one will end up in miscommunication. Next, there is information overload, right? What is information overload? In various organizations, the employees in key position get an unrestricted flow of information. Obviously, humans have a particular limit. They struggle with information overload. If you are giving too much of information to a particular person, it can definitely create confusion. And one can have a tendency to overlook important information when there is an information overload. Next one is distrust, threat, and fear. Now, inconsistent and unpredictable behavior of the superior in any organization leads to distrust. It leads to fear among the subordinates, and when these emotions are in play, it is very difficult to communicate. Distrust, threat, and fear can act as a barrier in the process of communication since it can lack coordination. Next is rigid attitude. What is the meaning of the word rigid? Rigid is one who is very narrow minded, not open to ideas. Now, human communication is all about sharing and conveying emotions, ideas, and attitude. A stubborn attitude, a person who is not ready to listen on the part of the listener, or it can also be on the part of the speaker, may lead to a failure in the process of communication. Communication should always be a two-way street. Like if two people don't agree on something, they should always agree to disagree, but it should not result in a fight. The process should be an amicable one. It's a well known fact that we cannot learn anything if we have a closed heart, if we have a closed mind and soul. It becomes very difficult to learn something new. The last one, which acts as a barrier, is emotional reaction. Sometimes we lose control over our emotions because of its intensity. If you're too happy, if you're too sad, that can sometimes create a barrier in the process of communication. When a person is too sad, they get choked up with emotions and are unable to hold a conversation. Other forms of emotion also can act as a barrier, like fear, suspicion, anger, joy. So, all these are emotions. So, emotions also sometimes play or act as a barrier in the process of effective communication. Thank you.